So, yeah, got it. Starting with roadmap discussion and on-ramp features. So, who wants to talk about that?
Well, I'll take it, but this was the intent was that we would dedicate a significant fraction of today's call to talking about what was coming in the future on each one of the major things. We normally spend our entire meeting talking about what just happened in the past. And so those bullets under on-ramp are just the on-ramp, but we also wanted to talk about what's going on with GNB Sim, Rock, and SD Core at the same time. And actually the QA, I had intended that we have a forward-looking talk there as well, although it looks like what has been recorded there is primarily status. I'm not sure of that.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think we're probably prepared to talk about a few rock related things. It looks like we have a little bit of we're missing Sean today. He may be off on other things, but starting
Okay,
with
let's give it a thank you, Scott. Let's give it a try. And if you and maybe Timon can record the bullets as they appear in real time.
yeah, yeah. I can serve as note taker. Myself, an anonymous squirrel can handle it.
All right, anonymous. Thanks.
Yeah.
So I had entered a few things about on-ramp. There's the high level bullet is we introduced Ansible as a way of managing the starting up of Kubernetes on multiple nodes. And once we did that, and we now is in collaboration with the folks at Purdue, they had been building out a pretty significant Ansible based management strategy for all of Aether. Particularly, they're focused on the core. And so we have decided to adopt it for bringing up not only Kubernetes on multiple nodes and the simulator also scaled, but also then the core and the rock and monitoring and so on. So that's the bonus. A major rewrite is underway. On-ramp it'll cover the same space as it currently does, and we could make it backward compatible if there was any reason to, but it will be pretty much a complete rewrite of what's going on internally in the implementation. We have been tripping over any number of, I'll throw one little status tidbit in here, tripping over a lot of configuration issues around the Mac VLAN. And long story short, multiple interfaces were responding to ARP, and there was very indeterminate behavior about whether you get connectivity and the simulator would complete successfully. Anyway, I think we're past those. And I'm very optimistic we're gonna have a really nice system as soon as it all comes together. Also been feeding some bug reports to the SD core group, so that I think is helpful.
So it's just sort of a top level point. The reason for not using Rancher and Fleet for this is just to keep the required footprint of infrastructure and components down.
Yes.
Okay.
And the Ansible, so Fleet is introduced as an option for managing for GitOps. But we didn't want, the point was that you don't need to install all of Rancher just to take the first step. And certainly that was the case with Aether in a box, but there was a point at which you advance Aether in a box, and then either you make that very large step to Rancher, or you run into a bit of a dead end in terms of bringing up multiple nodes. Probably not a dead end, but it was sort of how do you proceed?
Yeah, that sounds good.
So Fleet is still there as an option for managing, although now it kind of depends on how far you want to take the GitOps into the spec of the story. I think the other thing that we will eventually do here within pretty soon. This is all being, worked out in private Git repos right now in GitLab, but we'll move it to an ONF repository before much longer, so that it's open and available.
Okay, yeah, that sounds very good. Anything more on either on-ramp features?
I don't think so.
So we could move on to Gnode BSIM, which who would AJ and Badri, would you guys have the any feature set coming in those you would know on that, or someone else?
Yeah, I mean, I have idea what's coming in. Do we want to list it out here? Because last time I had pointed out that in the README file, like, it's already there in the GitHub.
Could you just give the high level bullets? Don't go into significant detail. Just
okay. So immediate goal is to support the handover feature in the Gnode BSIM, and adding the support to create the interface so that data traffic can be handled, right? So externally generated traffic can be consumed by Gnode BSIM and sent it towards UPF, right? So that these are the two high level things. Yeah, there are two separate bullet, Scott, if you're typing.
So there's a third one here, which is adding. I guess maybe this is what you mean by the second one.
Yeah.
We need to be able to put workload on the UPF. And that's really what the second bullet is about.
I didn't understand, what was that about UPF?
Putting workload on the UPF. All it does now is ping. There's no data traffic.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. I mean, this is about, like, yeah, we can generate a lot more data traffic if we start.
So that you could run, for example, iPerf.
Yeah.
Thank you. That covers it.
If we could just go back for a minute into the on-ramp discussion, you have a bullet there about a range of blueprints, but we didn't really talk about anything other than multi-node cluster. And this discussion is reminding me that we talked about different variants of UPF as being parts of different blueprints, like a best UPF, and there was some other version of the UPF coming in. And we also talked about multiple Gnode Bs.
Multiple Gnode Bs will fall out pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe, yeah. So I was kind of giving you the shorter term statement about what will be included in the new revamped version of it. The main reason for doing the revamping is to open the door to make it easier to do all of these other things. Mm-hmm. So the roadmap in the wiki for on-ramp still holds. All of those things are still there.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
I don't know about multiple UPF variants is a stretch. Multiple UPFs is definitely on the fairly near term horizon.
So you said this is an on-ramp wiki?
The on-ramp wiki, the current wiki is got a roadmap. It's not hugely detailed.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that wiki. That's do you have a URL for that?
Well, it's the on-ramp. Let me see if I can get you something. I'll put it in the chat window, and then maybe I can get into the document. Thanks.
Okay, and then we've
So before we move down, I have a question similar to the point about the external Gnode base, which is kind of considered right now is under on-ramp features. Is it the case, or the external Gnode base would be independent and can be tested if needed, can be tested with AIB and or on ramp, or would that be explicitly considered under on ramp features only?
I think on-ramp would be the right place to test that, if I'm understanding your question.
Okay. Okay, but then the Aether inherently should support it, right?
Say that again?
So Aether inherently should support the external Genode simulators. Is that the right?
Aether should support multiple Genode Bs, yes.
Okay. Mhm.
Well, I heard something about these simulators too, so I'm not sure.
Right. So this is basically, I'm talking about the second bullet point under the on-ramp features, the external Genode sim. So that's where I have a confusion that, would this be the part of the on-ramp feature, or would this be the part of the Aether?
I don't know. There is no such thing as Ether. There is only how you consume Ether using Ether in a box or on-ramp.
Right.
I mean, for a very practical way of putting that. There will be the ability to scale GNB sim, and we will have structured it in such a way that adding a second simulator, if you chose to do so, would be clear how to do it.
Okay.
The current implementation has the simulator embedded in the SD core. We're pulling it out, and that will make it easier to bring in other simulators, and it will make it easier to scale this particular simulator.
Right. Okay. And this would be possible using on-ramp, right?
Yeah, yes, that is probably one of the top. The biggest values that are coming with this, what's currently underway, is that the Ether components, SD core, for example, in Rock, can run on a multi-node cluster, and the simulator is now looks no different than an external Gnode B and scales independently.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. But then in
Larry,
that
we are
case,
getting.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, Ajay, please.
No, go ahead. My question is different.
No, I just wanted to ensure that, so this, the external Gnode B sim would be possible when we install or when we deploy Aether using on-ramp.
Okay,
right?
so let me just, I mean, we are complicating and confusing too much. It's like when we deploy, as of today, Aether, we are deploying Gnode B sim. So there was already an option that don't deploy Gnode B sim, right? That's like something enable Gnode B sim equal to false.
Okay.
So now if you do that, then it just deploys the regular 5G control plane without Gnode B sim. Now what I have seen is that the Purdue University folks, what they have been doing is that they clone Gnode B sim, they compile it, and then they run it separately as an executable outside your SD core, wherever it is, as long as you provide the network connectivity. So it doesn't matter whether Gnode B sim is acting against AIB or on-ramp or any other 5G core. It's just like, I mean, it's that simple, right? I mean,
Yeah. I thought about the same. Yeah, I thought about the same, but just was confused since it is under considered as a sub point of the on-ramp feature. That's why I was a little confused.
Well, so yeah, so there's two ways of looking at it. The on-ramp is structured so that you can bring up a scalable simulator in using many of the same mechanisms that you bring up a scalable core. They are two separate components that are brought up independently and can scale. Once you can do that, the simulator now runs standalone, and you could borrow that and move it into some other environment.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it. Thanks.
Okay, anything more on on-ramp? And anything more on GNB sim?
nothing, Scott. No.
That would take us to rock features. So I see we have Sean. So Sean, you joined a couple minutes in, but we're talking about what features we're going to be putting on the roadmap. So I know we've got a lot of stability stuff from Jordan. So I mean, there's the general stability and scalability and fault tolerance
Yeah.
improvements. Do we have more specifics than that?
I think RBAC as well, Scott, is something that I'd like to see on ramp. So that's, you know, the whole you know, key cloak and authentication and all that kind of stuff. So that's something I'd like to see there. And other than that, really, I don't know there's a lot we can commit to. I think the stability and scalability is we've always had challenges with it, but we're getting there. And you know, really ongoing maintenance, I think, is what we can commit to.
So I know Jordan had talked about alternate backends other than atomics, like etcd. Do you know if that's on our roadmap? I mean, is he committed to working on that?
I think it was still going to be behind atomics. It was
Okay.
CD behind atomics rather than what is it, Raft, or I think was it
Yeah, that's what I meant to
Dragon Boat?
say.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
Non-Raft.
that's yeah, I don't know I mean, I'm kind of a bit curious about the value of that because, like, etcd would seem to me to already have a sort of a, you know, a Raft protocol built in anyway. And I don't know if Atomics is duplicating that or not, but I think we need some analysis on that.
So could it possibly be the case that you're taking the Atomics runtime system and putting different consistency protocol mechanisms behind it?
I guess that's it. Yeah, it's really just using keeping the API of Atomics as a front end. And I think he called it Dragon Boat Raft is the Raft implementation he has. And I guess, yeah, you'd be swapping that out and using etcd instead. Yeah, and I think the reason for doing that was because the tools, there's a set of tools already existing for etcd, and they could help diagnosis and do a lot of the things that he'd only really be duplicating. So yeah, I think, yeah, maybe that's one for the roadmap then.
Yeah, but I mean, we do probably need to do some concrete planning about that before we can commit and say, you know, it will be etcd or it will be something else. So yeah, I think Jordan is out this week, but
yeah,
we
good
can
to have
touch
it on the list here, I think.
Yeah. Any other rock based stuff?
No, I mean, I think we're fairly stable on the whole models and all that, but you know, do you think there are model changes going to come in time, or like driven from SD core or anything like that?
That would be my question, is if there are features being added to SD core that are not reflected in Rock.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there would be an effort there to update Rock for any changes you have.
Yeah, and a
I
question would
don't.
be, you know, who does that? I mean, does this fall on the SD core team to take ownership of updating the rock I mean, is that part of implementing a new feature?
So Scott, we are not doing any of the changes on the API side. Mostly, what changes we have seen, I think recent API change was for the Pronto demo, right? Where I think you and Sean both were involved.
Yeah.
Apart from that, it's always like either bug fixes or some smaller changes within the SD core.
Okay.
So not much modeling changing needs to happen.
But I do see that there are some contributions coming in from communities about the providing APIs, about the fetching the slice details and device group details. And currently they are adding the changes in the backend, which is a web console in the SD core, right? If that contribution is pushed into SD core, then that question will arise that should we have that gate functionality within the ROC? Right, so, but for now, that code is still in under review, or you can say it's a work in progress pull request. Yeah.
So this would come down to the TST then to encourage people for their feature to be complete, that it needs to go beyond the core and into rock if we want to encourage that behavior. Because I don't think that Sean and I and other Intel people would be necessarily in the loop improving either modeling or improving the either SD core adapter.
Yeah, I think you're right, Scott. I think if the community doesn't take ownership of that eventually, then we're going to lose it. So I think you're probably right. And if all you care about is iterating on development of SD core, then maybe you don't care. But, and I'm now just speaking of the broader community, that why did they pick up Ether in the first place? If you're trying to support runtime traffic, then you want the runtime interface.
Right.
I think there is the discussion on the Slack, the company or the person who is contributing, they are developing their own lightweight GUI, and they may not be using ROC. That's the reason they're adding some of the APIs in the SD core, which seems to be perfectly fine, right? I mean, SD core can have some of the APIs which are not used by ROC, but maybe used by some other UI.
Yeah,
but
I mean, we're going to get divergence there, and I don't know that there's any way to control that. Everyone wants, I mean, this is the history of ROC and XOS before it. It's hard to coalesce people around that, much as you may want to.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to create a model-driven configuration system, and it's hard to update it. And yeah, if that causes it to fall into obsolescence, I don't know what you can do. I mean, documentation really is one thing, I guess, that could be improved, but there's so many different scenarios for extending ROC or with new models. I mean, we're working with a team that decided they wanted to make some changes to ROC, but then they wanted to keep them in a private repo. And to do that, then you've got to go in and copy it and fork it and change all the names so that all the Go modules work and all this kind of thing. And it even gets to be a bigger and bigger job. And like, that's something that I don't think we can document. I think, yeah, we can try documenting the sunny day scenario of extending ROC, but it quickly gets very complicated.
Yeah, I think the best we can do is to try to make it as easy to use what we have now, and then hope that's enough of an attractor. But
yeah. So I mean, for me, like the most logical place for something like that is maybe extending the Ether docs site with some more documentation on extending ROC. So I mean, that's probably a ROC kind of feature we could agree to.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, it's the centerpiece of what I tried to explain as the value, in the private 5G book and all the documentation that goes along with on-ramp, but depends on where your focus is.
Yeah, and it's also not that obvious to get the perspective of an outside user either. And I think I've sort of experienced some of that with the work that the Christians team are doing. They're seeing it from the outside and asking, how do we extend ROC? And yeah, it gives a new perspective on it, and I can see where the documentation might go with that.
Yeah, that's always been our challenge, and I think it's been sort of the battle that Larry and the rest of us have been fighting for like 2 decades. Is there's this adoption hurdle to extending the rock or before it XOS or cord, and the hurdle is just high enough that people won't tackle it, and they'll end up working around it, which ends up making a sort of siloed one-off GUI instead of contributing back to the general solution. But like I say, it's a battle we've been fighting for like 2 decades. And
so I think the takeaway here of lowering the barrier and documenting it well, and I mean that's something that I'm acutely aware of and interested in doing. So I will kind of take that as a takeaway here.
Yeah.
sounds good. Well, shall we move on to SD core features? That would be AJ and Badri.
Yeah. I mean, I won't call it feature, but I do see that there are two or three level of three active threads where I'm getting pulled into debugging. I don't find enough bandwidth from my side, and I don't see enough people supporting it as well. One of the thing is that there is one of the community members who are trying to deploy multiple SMF and AMF, but in little bit different way. They wanted to have the dedicated SMF only for specific slices. Right? They have been like struggling to get the help from the community. That's one area. Need to make sure that we improve the document on that, and maybe try out those experiments within our labs or our setup to see if that really works. I mean, we do have some kind of idea, like how if somebody wish to spin up or add new instance for specific slice, how to do that, right? We have some idea. And when I was suggesting that to the member, right, community member, it didn't seem to work, or maybe there were too many things to be understood to make sure that person understand how whole this thing works, and then they try out on the steps, right? So I found there are a lot of gaps there, and there are a lot of to and fro messages, but eventual result was not so good. I mean, we still don't have that success, right? The other case is that the Purdue University case, where they are trying to do the multiple AMF and multiple SMF, but they want to share the AMF and SMF across the slices. So they don't want to keep the specific network functions only for some slice, right? So it's a sharing of the network function. And when they tried, like we do see like one of the specific cases, we do see some like SD code doesn't respond or doesn't accept the calls, and it rejects the UE registration. So I'm working with the Bilal and Professor Shabas to see how that issue can be fixed. Yeah, that's the second area. And third area, like while GS Lab is working on the test cases, that I do see that a lot of questions come from them, which I'm replying to them, but I'm worried that if same set of questions comes from somebody else later, right, then it's going to be rework for me to tell the, like, what is it that's supported, what is it not supported in the SD core, right? So,
And you said
yeah,
this was
these are
on
the,
this third area. This was on testing.
which one, which bullet you're saying?
I missed the subject of your third bullet point. What GS
Third is
Labs
like a
asking.
GS Lab. They are writing some of the test case for 1.3 SD core, and in general about some of the feature of the SD core. And they do have some of the questions, and the questions are not very straightforward to answer. Like sometimes it might go in the para to answer, right? Some of the question, like some questions are very much open. So I was just wondering, like just answering those questions in that Excel file, is it good enough, or should I contribute in the doc so that it becomes open to everyone, right? And then in some cases there are many more questions comes from community, but I think current challenge is that if you don't respond to those people, they will probably get discouraged, right, in adoption. at least in one of the case, I was able to work with the that company which is adding that support in the like get subscription from the web console, and then storing the subscription in the MongoDB. So eventually, even if web console restarts, we don't lose any of the subscription. So Scott, and if you remember, we had the way of like if web console restarts, we used to resync the config with the rock, right?
Yeah.
And that was required because web console was not storing anything in the database. That subscription was not stored in the database. So now with if this new pull request gets agreed and merged, then we don't need any resync, right? So we will have the configuration backup in the database. So yeah, I mean, a lot of time gets consumed just to support this activity. And on top of
And
this, the GNodeB SIM features are also like I'm working with the Purdue team to make sure those setups and those features become available. Yeah.
yeah, in that last case on the persistence, was that because someone is pursuing one of these non-rock interfaces and
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, they realized that we don't have gate APIs, and then while code reading, they found that we are not storing the config in the database. We are just keeping it in memory, right? So that's the reason they started
Yeah.
working on it. Yeah. So I did
So
ask
that's
them they plan to use Rock, and they said that no, and this all conversation is there on the Aether day, if I'm not wrong. Yeah.
yeah, so I
So
think
this.
that's one of the things, Larry, that you should, emphasize as one of these challenges to going your own route and developing your own UI is, you start missing features that the Rock gave you, and then you have to task someone to re-implement those features in a different way, which, now we end up with differences and divergences and but it's also community and we can't really force them to do it our way.
Yeah, no, that you're absolutely right. And I mean, as you know, you have been spending some time just achieving parity with what you had before, but yeah, agreed.
Okay.
So,
Well, anything else on SD Core? I think the gist of
mm,
it is that, AJ is doing a lot of support activity, but not necessarily a lot. But it looks like community is driving any new features.
so I'm actually the way is like I'm helping the Purdue University to do the that fixing that second point, multiple SMF AMF shared. We had few meetings to debug their issues.
Yeah,
I discussed it internally with one of the AMF developer. We have some clues, and if we get confirmation, then I'll ask them to either contribute the new code addition, or we'll have to see like how it works out, right?
yeah,
And then the GNodeB handover as well. They have asked me to give them some of the handholding, and then they are probably ready to provide the feature, right? So yeah.
sure. So
Do
moving,
we need to, sorry, just to point out, do we need to add, I think somebody from the Intel Labs, whoever is working on the UPF features onto this call, because they've been adding, like trying to add the CNDP feature onto UPF. And I mean, if they are here, they could kind of update on how that progress is going, because they have added, I think, multiple features onto UPF, which
That's right.
the
I think,
community can use.
yeah, I think especially I worked with Gabriel for last few months to add some path monitoring and then latency monitoring, and he did raise the pull request as well.
Right.
I think, and if I'm not wrong, I think we had invited to Gabriel and Christian into this meeting. I'm not sure if they don't join or this meeting when we updated the meeting slot, if we missed out then. So.
pinged. Yeah, so they could be pinged again to see if they got lost when meetings moved or otherwise
But
lost their invite.
yeah, but they have done a lot of UPF
Oops.
related changes and cleanup in last few months.
Yeah,
So definitely that's something, and they continue to work on their own projects, right? And they continue to use the UPF and whole Aether as such for all their projects, right? So
okay. Anything more before we move on to QA roadmap?
One thing I like this, like, how do we make sure that like the Kunal and Amit, right? I think you all are aware about the SD core, right? But I do get a lot of questions. Probably, is it possible for you guys to get some of the answers yourself by looking at the code or documentation? Because current relation seems to be very much QA dev relation, which is not so healthy. We're asking question and waiting for the answer, right? So given that you all have the experience on the Aether and maybe SD core, right? How can we avoid that dependency, right? Waiting, like some of the questions I find it like then sometimes I feel guilty that like it's like blocking because I'm not able to respond, right? So and that also doesn't sound right given the GS Lab has been active in the Aether project for quite some time. So and this question is for the QA or GS Lab team, right?
Yeah, sure, Ajay. We can, think towards that. And I think we have, we got a few things answered internally as well. But some of the new features are were unclear to us, so that is why so many queries were there. And from the release notes, we could see only uh, one-liners, uh, one-liner description onto that, and we were not sure where exactly we can find the exact document or the explanation of it. So
Yeah, I think the
if we can add a, yes, add a link of the explanation in the release notes itself, that would be really helpful.
yeah, I mean it's yeah, we tried all our best to document each and every. I mean, I personally monitored that each developer adds their own like enough document. They may not have added link, but under the configuration tab, we should find most of the details, right? So if I have to add it again, it takes time to add the link. I mean, maybe we can take it up for sure, but I mean, sometime exploring the existing SD code docs website, right, may not be so hard. So
Yeah,
I'm just trying to see like, yeah, question can be are definitely welcome, but if like, some of the things like if either quickly looking at the doc website and seeing if there's a documentation available or showing that there is some homework done before asking question, right, is very much important, right? Especially when everybody is doing like community work here, right? So
got it.
yeah. And this time like it's roughly like 50 to 100 test cases, whatever you have asked for review. Mostly I have reviewed and it's going in the to and fro, right? I have added comment, then again there is cross question or further questions, right? But that's what I
Right.
mean. All are valid and good question. Only thing is it like only I can answer that question? Probably no. There should be other people also should be able to answer, or some of the things can be explored easily, right? So yeah, we would definitely want to see if that kind of model also be done and not just a strictly traditional QA dev relation, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I
Yeah,
understand,
great.
Ajay, the point that you're trying to make. I completely understand. But the questions that we have been raising so far has definitely gone, filtered ones with respect to our understandings and with respect to whatever is mentioned as a part of the new feature that is there. What we can do is we can do one more, additional filtrations and additional understandings with respect to the configs, and maybe even if possible need to look into the code and as well. But the request from my side is once we do that filtration, if you are available for half an hour or maybe 45 minutes for the call, in that case, I think this to and fro would be avoided there. Anytime, whenever you are free, just for half an hour or 45 minutes, and we will get all our questions answered. And once that is done, we won't bug you then.
No, it's not about bugging. I'm more worried that things getting blocked just because some person is not able to answer, right? So we have to
Yeah.
in a way we have to find out how we can get the wider support and how we can use your expertise, right, to unblock,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
I do understand that, and I also understand that, you know, once we started with this QA stuff, the release was under already process and other things. So maybe for the next releases on all the other roadmaps discussions that we are doing, maybe we can have a different approach. You know, while it is getting developed or while it is getting strategized and other things, QA can get right away involved into that, and so that understands those nitty-gritties in detail. But for all the questions that are there right now, what we can do is we can add one more level of filtration in terms of looking into the configs and looking into the code, and then we would be ready with our questions. If you are available maybe this week or early next week, we'll have just a simple call with 30 minutes or 45 minutes, and then we'll get all our questions answered there, if there are any in that case.
I think
Does that
I
sound
have
okay?
again. Yeah, fine. I have responded to almost all the question now. I don't see
Yeah.
anything outstanding. There's one definitely which is too big, where I think that it cannot be answered in the Excel file.
Sure.
That's so. Yeah. Okay.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Sure. So we will take a look at all those things again. We'll do a grooming session. We'll do an internal discussions. We'll also look into the configs. We'll also try to look into the codes and other thing. And then you know, we'll just give you a list of questions that we would need, and just your time for half an hour, and then we'll be done with that.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. Thanks for that. Moving on to QA roadmap and strategy. So, who wants to take this section on QA?
Yeah, I'll take this up. This is Kunal. So yeah, our roadmap would be like we are right now we are um, verifying the developed features, and we are doing it manually first, and then we'll move on to automation. And regarding automation, we'll be adding the newly tested features first, and um, we are looking into the opportunity of replacing NG40 test with GNB sim, and we are trying to do a POC first with the GNB sim, and we'll be taking up one or two test cases initially and automate them and try to integrate it with the existing framework itself.
And then this next bullet, what does TCMS expand out to?
Yeah, that one is test case management system. So we
Okay.
have we have created a document where which is a kind of manual um, for all the uh, QA activity that we are doing. So it is a single place where we are recording all the test cases and the test plans.
Okay, so if I'm understanding right, the state is pretty much there's manual tests now, they're documented, there's test plans written, and then you're working toward creating automation that we could run, you know, from Jenkins or something in an automated fashion.
Right.
Yes, that's correct. But all of these activities would be on a priority too. Well, if there is any feature that's get developed and that is up for the testing, so the goal would be to first test it, uh, and give a go ahead, no go ahead, file the bugs related to it, so that the other teams can really look into that and then can solidify that feature. And once we
Sure.
have a kind of you know, no priority work in terms of the queuing that already developed features, we would go back to the strategic items of, you know, updating, adding the automating the things which are already there, replacing the already automated NG40 test cases with GNB SIEM and other things, and then, you know, making sure that we have a test, we record everything in the test case management system, the priorities, which ones are automated, which ones are not, and stuff like that.
Sure. Sounds good to me. Larry, did you have anything, or Timon, did you have anything more you wanted to get in the roadmap here on QA?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. So I don't know if this is a roadmap item, but it's more about sort of the strategy. You know, I think that the the vision or goal was for the GS Lab team, this Aether QA team, to what? To really interface with or kind of report back into the TST and to kind of establish a relationship here. And we're all here today, and that's great. Larry and I were talking, and I think that so the next layer down is perhaps that Larry to take sort of a prime role in sort of guiding the QA sort of strategies or activities around Rock, and to ask, and I think it was agreed with AJ here, but please correct me if I'm wrong. For kind
I
of
think you meant on ramp.
Not so much actually. I think my so
you meant
again,
Rock.
correct me if I'm wrong. But well, I mean, it's we're here today, or it's for this group to really decide. But I think that's with sort of the initial view of, hey, kind of the TST could kind of help guide, sort of serve that dev-like role for the QA team. But then maybe that was a little bit too ambiguous still. A single point of ownership might be clearer, and so then. But Larry, tell me where your head is at and where your understanding is at.
Well, I think the meta point that I took away from our discussion was putting the TST in charge of something is putting no one in charge. Instead, I mean, that's the risk. But if each of the TST members, because they happen to be active in these various areas, took a bit of ownership of directing that area, AJ, SD core, Sean, maybe Rock, me on ramp, and like that, there would be a more direct connection somehow.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. What do others think about it?
Well, just from my perspective on Rock, I mean, the bandwidth I can sort of offer is pretty limited. I mean, I think it would have to be more of a pull relationship than a push. Taking ownership is something that is going to be quite difficult. I mean, we're in totally different groups now, and Rock is kind of going more and more out of focus for us. It's really, now that Pronto has finished, and we're not fully clear on how Rock fits into Intel products. It's just something that I have concerns about. That's all I'd say.
Yeah, I would sort of echo Sean's concerns that, we don't know. I mean, I'm not to the point I could say where it doesn't have a future. It may very much have a future, but it doesn't have an immediate term tasking associated with it right now, beyond just having people fix these stability issues that we've talked about before.
Got it. Makes sense. So I guess what I was hoping is that, so, if there isn't development that's going into it, then, the QA function is going to be relatively static, I suppose. I mean, the big, trying to get some coverage and, some regression testing for future releases to make sure things aren't breaking. And so, the scope of the job perhaps goes down as well. But, I mean, trying to frame it in the most positive way is that, this GS Lab QA resource is an available resource. And, Sean, for you, if there are things going on in Rock, or, changes that are going on around stability and whatnot too, you could be making asks of the QA team to write certain test scenarios, or, and test and verify certain things, and view it as a resource that helps you. This is not something to encumber you, but, view it as a positive. And same on the SD core as well, is that or you or somebody else on your team perhaps could really try to view this QA function as an opportunity, and just try to help some guidance on, for what kinds of capabilities or features we want to focus on more than anything else.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, the word ownership above, I think, was really the concerning part. I mean, the thing is if for instance, like, there are several weeks pass and there's no new functionality added to Rock, it's me taking ownership of what the testing team are doing really wouldn't be practical. So yeah, I think it's more kind of a reactive thing than being like proactive about the ownership.
Yeah. Or is there another word than ownership? I mean, it's kind of
Yeah, I like the way Timon just put it, and that was kind of the intent, is that you view GS Labs as a resource, and if you have any asks, ask. It sure
Yeah.
would be nice if we were testing this and we're not.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not hung up on the word ownership. I mean, I think you understand my concerns, and I think they're well noted here. So yeah.
Yeah.
Let's
So
not get hung
another
up.
a qualifier is it's not your responsibility to keep GS Labs busy. If the amount of work goes down because you've got the test you need, then that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think, if GS Labs could spend some time making sure that we have strong, regression tests and scalability tests and automation of all the above. I mean, I think, as if there's one pain point we've had, it would be when someone like Jordan, improves atomics, and then we don't have like huge confidence that there's a large testing infrastructure to verify that didn't break a scalability problem, or that didn't break a regression problem someplace.
It sounds
If GS
like
Labs could, oh, go
it
ahead.
sounds like you're de-emphasizing new features and testing new features. And I would agree with what you just said. It's more to have the scalability and regression.
Yeah. I mean, I would love it if we had complete confidence that, we changed something in atomics and we will know whether we broke something. I don't feel like we have that confidence necessarily today. Would you agree with me, Sean, that that's maybe where we could most use the assistance?
Yeah, I think it is. I think you and I definitely don't have the bandwidth to test those things, and I think GS Labs are probably in the best position to do that. They have the setup, they have the machinery and automation. So yeah, definitely that would be a useful resource.
Well, this sounds like a promising way to look at it. And Sean, I really love the last sentence, kind of, viewing GS Lab as a useful resource that can really help you, and not encumber you. And, perhaps for each of these focus areas, core, on-ramp, and rock, just helping to come up with a bit of a definition of, regression test, what specifically should we be regressing, or, what scalability pain points do we want to be focusing on? And, helping to just define the target, the goals, for each of these projects might help them get off and execute.
There is another aspect to it. For instance, I know Canal has been doing good work there on trying out various automated tests for the API, and he has raised a couple of bugs, and really I don't have a good simple answer for those bugs. And that's something where it's going to take cycles, I guess, on my behalf. But I think if GS Labs were able to help more in sort of understanding, where these errors are coming from and that kind of thing, that would be ideal too. So there's a push and a pull there. And there are certain issues that we just don't have the bandwidth to look at on a weekly basis.
Mm-hmm.
So if they were able to contribute, so to more fine-grained analysis as well, I think that would be a big advantage. And that will take time and understanding, to get to that point.
And I understand. Well, you're pointing out the second order issue that, once we start having more tests, we're uncovering more problems, and then, we don't necessarily have the bandwidth or a clear path for getting the problems discovered fixed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, the extent to which GS Lab can help kind of fill that gap, or with more thorough understanding, or sort of trying to get towards or pointing towards root cause, all of that, helps. I can't think of anything, else. I mean, I'm not sure NF is in a position now to kind of resource GS Lab more to try and go after fixing things, right? That's going to be a slippery slope.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do is really enable the community and make sure as pull requests come in that nothing else is breaking, so that developers have kind of more rapid feedback, and hopefully, while they still have attention on a problem, we'll sort of fix interrelated issues as things are coming in. But there's going to be a backlog of sort of hidden problems, perhaps, that are going to get uncovered as the testing scope expands.
Yeah, I think I agree, Timon. I think that the testing is more important at this point than the fixing, because if you don't have confidence in the testing, then more problems are going to accumulate and build up, and even fixing something can cause 3 more problems, and so I would very much like to see the effort spent on getting the scalability, the regression, and the automation done. And then, a secondary case is fixing all of the things that come up. But we will just need that understanding that, Sean, myself, and others don't necessarily have the bandwidth to throw toward fixing a problem when it comes up, and that might have to get punted back to the community. And with that, I'm going to have to take off because I have another meeting coming up.
And it is top of the hour, Scott. I really appreciate you stepping in here and helping me out.
Sure.
And I think this was a great effort, more forward looking. I know that we didn't have time for all the status, but I think we got a lot of stuff out here. So we will just pick it up again next week.
Sounds good.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks all.
Good seeing everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.